Good afternoon, everybody. Hi, there's Tim Constantine with you on the Capitol Hill Show. Now, let's take a peek back, just over, let's say the last 10 years or so. After 9/11, do you remember the panic after September? And understandably, I understand it's a scary time. Oh, America's under attack on our own soil. It's a scary time. What the government chooses to do with that, though, is equally scary. And now I travel, as you know, I commute back and forth from Florida. I'm here in D.C., but I go back. I fly a lot. I fly more than your average bear. And what I see at least twice and sometimes 4 or 5 times a week is what I call security theater. Security theater. I know it puts on a great show and it makes people feel better. Oh, I guess we're safe now. But I got to tell you, it is not foolproof. And I'm going to leave it at that. I don't want to aggravate my friends at the TSA because I don't want to get pulled out of line the next 12 times I go through. However, it is security theater. Let's look at the economy. Our economy, around 2008 started to tank. And so what has the government done? It has gone ahead and pumped, almost $1 trillion a year, about 85 billion every month into the economy. They're artificially propping it up. It's kind of like if you have a cavity and your tooth really hurts, you can put Anbesol on it and you won't feel the pain, but it doesn't make the cavity go away. Same idea here. The government gets involved and is giving this artificial cover to the pain with our economy. They will continue to do that, I guess, at least through the next federal election. Maybe it'll continue after that. Who knows? But is there a price to pay? You're darn right there is. Now, the most recent one, Ebola. Ebola. It's all Ebola all the time. The media is covering this thing inside out. People are in a panic. Oh, my God, we're all going to die. This is Armageddon. Not exactly. Ebola's been around since 1976. It is serious. It is a bad thing. You don't want to be exposed to it. However, it is not the end of the world. This is not end of times. But the government is going to put these new protocols in. Will I have medical theater the way I have security theater at the airport? I don't know. But why is it that the government is constantly coming up with new ways to control our lives? Every time there is some sort of crisis, what's it mean? A chance for more government control. Joining me right now is the author of a new book called Ant Farm, a novel about what's bugging society. You might know him as Freaky Flo, but nowadays he goes by the name Stephen Aaron Gray. Stephen, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks very much for being here. Now, you're I would describe you as a leading voice in the libertarian community. For people that don't understand libertarian views, what is the general concept of a libertarian?
Well, there are differing opinions. Some people will call themselves a libertarian and mean something else than what other people call themselves. But my understanding is that the general thread is that people who call themselves pro-liberty want the minimal amount of state involvement in their lives. Essentially, they want to be able to do whatever they want, so long as they're not interfering with any other person's rights to property or to life.
We sell it as personal responsibility. I go and do what I will, and I take responsibility for those actions, and I don't want to impact anybody else, but if it impacts me, if I go out and do something crazy, if I choose to smoke marijuana, which I do not, but the theory for libertarians, if they make that choice, then they live with the consequence. It is their own choice and their own consequence. Government should not be involved.
Yeah, that's exactly right. People are supposed to have the right to do things that may not be great for them. The government's not supposed to protect you from yourself. It's supposed to protect you from other people.
I just call the government Dad now. Okay, Dad.
There you go.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Now, here's the question. Is every time there is a big crisis, you heard me on the intro, I mentioned 3 in particular over the last decade, and
yes.
Every time there is a crisis, people panic, and they turn, and they do. I say Dad jokingly, but they look at the government like a parent. What do we do? What do we do? And the government is none too happy to go ahead and say, well, you know what? We'll help you with this from now on. Why does society as a whole look to the government to bail them out?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. First of all, if the government isn't involved in a given problem, it's a problem. There are problems that exist in the world no matter how little the government is involved in those things. And people want solutions to these problems. And we're just, everyone I know at least, including myself, we're all raised usually in government schools to think that the government can provide solutions to these problems. Very seldom are we ever told the truth, which is that government usually exacerbates these problems and actually makes them worse. So I think it comes from a need to want to solve a problem, and our gut reaction from our early education is to think that government can fix these problems, and it just isn't true.
Let's break down a couple of the current ones. Let's talk about the Ebola virus. It's a scary situation, and if as I looked at the Thomas Duncan situation, he sat for 3 hours when he came in. I used to travel all the time to and from West Africa. I did business down there. I lived down there, and so I understand the route. I understand the people. I understand the lack of medical care there. I'm intimately familiar with West Africa and their problems. But when Thomas Duncan came into the United States, he sat for 3 hours in Dulles Airport. I fly in and out of Dulles all the time. He then went to Dallas, Texas, and the people not knowing in the emergency room, the people not realizing what they were dealing with, actually turned him away the first time he was sick. He comes back the second time, and ends up, poor guy dies. But the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, comes and has these protocols. Okay, we want all the healthcare workers. We will protect you. We're going to take care of this. Don't worry about it. No problem at the borders. We're screening people. And we have a protocol for the healthcare workers to make sure they are not sick. Not one, but two of the nurses that took care of Thomas Duncan then test positive for Ebola. So obviously the CDC protocols were flawed. But yet we are still turning on a daily basis, turning to the CDC saying, what do we do?
Yeah, absolutely. This is the nature of government agencies. It doesn't matter how many times they're wrong and how much they screw up. You and I still have to pay for them through taxation, and if we choose not to, we go to jail. The same isn't true for, say, less serious but parallel services like Michelin restaurant ratings. If they were to start getting everything wrong, we could simply not trust them anymore, and they would go out of business. The CDC doesn't go out of business. The government doesn't go out of business. If they're wrong, they still get funding, and they also come with this built-in so-called authority that people just trust because it's, quote-unquote, the government. And we really need to get away from trusting them as much. At the end of the day, these are just people. They're not perfect. And when they make mistakes, we have to start seeing them as mistakes and look for alternative solutions the way we do in other areas of our lives.
Now, in the book, I love the analogy here when you say ant farm, because we're lemmings, we're ants. We just follow. So much of American society, so much of human nature is to go along. All right, we were told this will be the safe way to do it. We were told security will be better at the airports now. So we just go along with it. Go ahead, and we give up our liberties in the process. Is there a way? Is there an effective way for us to turn that around, to slow down the government train? Because as you say, you choose not to pay your taxes, you end up in prison. That's not an effective way of doing it. So how can we affect change?
Well, it's very difficult, especially if you're a person that feels this way and you're not surrounded by very many other people that feel the same way. So off the top of my head, there are a couple things I can think of. One is to just educate people around you, and that's really what I've tried to do with my book, Ant Farm, is to wake people up to what's going on around them, because I understand a lot of people do just go along to get along. We all have busy lives, and we have to figure out how to pay bills and put food on the table. We can't be focused on every little microscopic detail in which the way that government is stripping us of our freedoms. But there are also other ways that you can counter this problem. One of the great ways, I think, even though it hasn't been doing so fantastic lately, is to be purchasing and using Bitcoin as an alternative currency. Bitcoin, of course, is a digital currency. and your listeners can certainly look more into that. But the great thing about that is it's not government controlled. So the government can't inflate Bitcoin currency like they can with the fiat dollars that they issue every day and devalue it all. Another great way that I can think of is by people that love liberty ought to band together. And I know not everybody can do this. I certainly am not in a position where I can pick up and move, but a lot of people are, and where they're going to is a place is New Hampshire, as part of this project called the Free State Project. And when these people band together, they're just much more effective at doing, outside of the system activism and peaceful resistance to their freedoms being taken away. And that, from what I've seen, that's been a pretty effective method.
You do realize it gets really cold in New Hampshire, don't you?
That's one reason. That's one reason. It's not the only reason I'm not there, but yeah, I spent most of my life in Toronto, Canada, and now I'm here in Los Angeles, and it's difficult to go. It's difficult to get away from here. I certainly am one of those frogs in the boiling water and keeps getting turned up, and it's comfortable.
It's funny though when you say it. I make light of it, but it's funny when you say it because there are different pockets around the country that seem to be more independent than others. I grew up in the state of Maine, and it's when I go back to Maine, when I was a kid in the 1970s, they elected a independent governor. They ignored the Republican, they ignored the Democrat, they chose the independent. They've done that since then. They've sent independent congressmen. Right now they have an independent United States senator.
Right.
They, more than any state in the union, choose the person, not the party. And so I'm fascinated by the way they do the process there, but also and you'll get a kick out of this other part, is when I am in Maine, I go up every summer and hang out. When I'm in Maine, I take note that a lot of the little, insurance-motivated signage that are at kids' events or things that, because we're in a lawsuit-happy world, none of that exists in Maine. When I go somewhere, they don't have the triple and quadruple signage for safety features and so on, because society there is very different. People don't think that, I've got to go ahead and sue. I'm going to get a free ride out of this. They think, you know what, Billy shouldn't have been climbing up that tree anyway. And they take Billy home and they give him a little swat on the rear end and end of issue. And I just think to myself, golly, it's like yesteryear. Personal responsibility is still alive and well, and I'm sure there are other places. I happen to be familiar with Maine, but I'm sure there are other places. And yet here in D.C., I don't see any of that. I see people that are lemmings following along with whatever they're told to do.
Yeah, and it really is the same here in Los Angeles, and much the same way when I go back and visit friends and family in Canada. And I think it's a growing trend probably around the world in these pockets that you speak of that I'm also fortunate to see every once in a while are not as common as they used to be. But, the more people that become aware of this problem, the more people that value their freedom and that embrace personal responsibility, I think it is certainly possible to turn this trend around if people start to realize what's going on around them. It really is a pattern. I think people latch on to one or two issues and think, I want more freedom in this one issue. I want freedom in either gun control, or I want to be able to ingest substances. And they don't realize that all of these things are connected. That if really you love freedom, you should be in favor of freedom in all of these issues and not just one or two. Because you may win your one or two issues and watch all the other freedoms disappear.
Just so you know, Stephen, I have not yet decided whether I will or will not be seeking the libertarian nod for the presidency of the United States in 2016. We'll have an announcement sometime in 2015.
Interesting. Sounds good.
All right, my friend. Hey, thank you for the time today. I hope we get to talk again. The name of the book is Ant Farm, a novel about what's bugging society. It's Stephen Aaron Gray. Stephen, thank you.
Thank you so much.